Hello, we are coming back from executive session, which we held at the superintendent's conference room at the central office. We are now in the Wyndham chambers, and we have already called the meeting to order. So this is March 27th, 2019. It is 6:40, and I will entertain a motion to go into executive session.
Excuse me. I move to approve going into executive session to consider the possible readmission of a student pursuant to 1 MRSA subsection 405(6)(b).
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Okay. Could I have a motion, please?
I move to approve the student under consideration be readmitted to school and that the superintendent provide the parents with a written summary of the board's findings.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Good luck. Okay.
We have a small
Give it a minute as people come in. And we're waiting for Christine. Okay.
They were delivered already.
Can we I think we're going to have to take a break till she gets here. Is that Bill, I'm sorry. We're going to need to take a break for a second while we wait for okay. Thank you. Oh, Danielle.
I'm still spinning.
Okay. All right. We are now back in session after our short break. And we're ready to hear Christine Hessler, who is going to talk to us about the Jumpstart program. I'm trying to vamp a little bit.
Yeah, when waiting, it's spinning. It isn't all the way yet, so I'm just waiting for it to load. So the board has requested that we come and take a look at our Jumpstart data for the past couple of years. In fact, the board, each of you have the slideshow presentation in front of you, so if I have to do finger puppets for the community, but I can get it posted on there as well. Let me get lucky. So we wanted to do is when we started Jumpstart back in 2014, if you can believe it, we wanted to know what kind of impact it made on our students. We knew that when they began in kindergarten, we had great success of students learning letter sounds and letter names, and we were giving them a boost into our school system before they started at the kindergarten level. So what I've done is, this has been a great project because collecting all this information and following children through, our first group of Jumpstart kids are actually in 4th grade now, which is kind of hard to believe when you think about it. And so what we've done is we have followed these students, and at the end I'm going to tell you about the process because of the project you handed me, which is now in place in the RSU, which I'm really excited about. And so when we started in 2014, we had 45 students in the cohort. We now have 24 left. 16 have actually left the RSU. That was one big factor as I went through this, at how many students have actually moved from us from that beginning part. And then I broke down the percentage of students who met or exceeded the benchmark. And for what we use for this benchmark is the DRA. If you remember back to Jumpstart, we use letter sounds and letter naming. We don't get into the DRA until we're into the school years. So at the end of kindergarten, 88% of our students met or exceeded the end of the benchmark. In grade 1, it drops down to 60%, goes to 64 at grade 2, and 67% of those students in grade 3. Now those students are in grade 4, and 5 of those students are now enrolled in Title I reading. 2 of the students are enrolled in special education, and in that original cohort of students, 4 of them have been retained. So I think that's important information that we look at this population of students. The next is our class of 2015. The cohort of students are now in 3rd grade. And I forgot to put the number on there of how many left, but I'll get that for you. So the percentage of students met or exceeded 70% at the end of kindergarten, 35 at the end of 1st grade, and 60 at the end of 2nd grade. So in grade 3 right now, 3 students are enrolled in the Title I program. 11 of the students in this cohort are enrolled in special education, and 2 of them have been retained. So,
Christine, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Can you just go through this again a little bit? I'm going back to the class of 14.
Yep, you can go back. There you go.
So there's 45 students that were in that program
Yes.
during that first year. 24 students are now in 4th grade.
Yep.
What happened to the other 21?
So 16 left and 4 were retained, so they're not in that cohort.
Let's see. Oh, it says 16 left in the RSU.
Oh, I'm sorry, that meant left the RSU. Sorry.
Left. Okay. So 16 left. There's 24. There's 5 missing. Or does that 5?
4 were retained. So I'm missing 1.
All right.
Oh, 1 was promoted. Thank you,
Almost
Julie.
promoted.
Thank you.
All right.
Yes.
What does it mean
Yeah.
when it's retained? Just held back? or-
They're held back a year.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Thank you.
And when I get to the end, I'll tell you how we're deaconed out. Thank you, Julie. We did have 1 student who actually was moved up a grade from the Jumpstart program. So we're back to 2016. We had 40 in this cohort of students. They're now in 2nd grade. We had 11 of those students move. At the end of the kindergarten year, 42% ended at the benchmark. 51 at the end of summer. This is the first year we put Boost in. 6 of those students attended Boost. This was the first year that the benchmark in kindergarten went from a 3 to a 4. So this was a really big transition, not only for students but for staff. If I combined the benchmark levels for 3 and 4, like we had done the previous years, that percentage at the end of kindergarten would have been at 81%. So because we moved the bench up, it took some adjustment in our teaching staff. And 55% of them were at benchmark at the end of grade 1. So currently in 2nd grade, 7 of those students are in Title I, receiving interventions. 10 of the students are enrolled in special education, and 2 out of this group are retained. So the class of 2019 Jumpstart kiddos, this is the year we also had Boost, so we had 30 in Jumpstart instead of the 45, and we had 30 in Boost. These kiddos are now in the 1st grade. We've had 6 move. Again, 38 meant the end of kindergarten benchmark at that level 4. We had 7 of the kids went to Boost, so that raised that percentage up to 52%. And then the combined, again, benchmarks, if we looked at 3 and 4, we're at 80% at the end of kindergarten. And so 10 students right now in grade 1 are enrolled in Title I reading. 7 of the students are enrolled in special education, or they're in the RTI process, and 2 of that group have been retained. And then this summer, our kids, 29 kids participated in the program. 100% of all those kids were at or above the benchmark at the end of the program, wow. And 97% of the students were at above the fall benchmark in kindergarten. There was one student who missed it by a smidge. And again, that's not DRA. It is the fall benchmark of letter sounds and letter pieces. So some conclusions, and I did bring some visitors with me tonight. A number of students have moved in the RSU. We're getting some quicker referrals for RTI and special education because students have attended the program. I have parents. I had 3 parents call already to my office in January asking how to get their incoming kindergarten into the program, because the word is out. The program is done well. We also had a Department of Education visit last year because we did receive summer funds. So we had an audit, and Jackie Godbout came down and had her whole checklist and had an absolute ball, was extremely impressed with our staff, our students, and the program, and everything that we offer. So it was a great visit. Usually those are not fun. They're a little bit nerve-wracking, but she was very impressed with the data collection, how teachers were assessing what students were doing at that time frame that they were there. And so with this project, we've now created and put in a district-wide process in Infinite Campus. So we've never had this piece before, and as my two colleagues behind me are gonna answer any questions, we're trying to find all this information on these kids, and they're all in different classrooms and buildings, and how do we do this? So Infinite Campus has been used, and Rita Rotting helped create flags so that we can then flag a child who attended Jumpstart or attended Boost.
Oh, good. Yeah.
And we also created a DRA under the assessment tab. So I've gone in and entered all the DRAs for all those kiddos for the end of each school year, and we'll be working through that process for all students to have it in there. So now I could call up a Jumpstart student who might have been in 4th grade, and I can see all of the end of year benchmarks and where they are. If a student was in Jumpstart and then went to Boost, I can have their end of kindergarten grade, their end of kindergarten level. If they made an increase, I can change to the increase, and I make a note that the student attended Boost and moved up 2 levels, so that we have a record of what is happening with those students. So it's the two ladies behind me have been instrumental in talking about what's the easiest way to streamline this. How do we do this? How do we track these kids? And this has been a really good eye-opening and easy piece to do that. So our next steps, which these two ladies are very much involved in, is looking at the longitudinal data and interventions in grades 1 and 2. There's a significant drop-off between 1 and 2, and why is that happening? So those are the pieces that we're looking at. We can bring to light. We can have the conversations. What are we doing with these kiddos? So I'd like to introduce and ask these two people to come up. The first one is Julie Young. She is our standards-based teacher and house leader at the Wyndham Primary School, and Shannon Bartash is the standards-based teacher at Raymond Elementary School, to see if any of you have any questions or insights that they might want to share, because they are the faces of our interventions with our kiddos. So these two ladies look at every data point, analyze them, help assign interventions for our students, and then follow up and progress monitor. And so the constant communication between what they're doing with their teachers, with their ed techs, their Title I teachers, is huge in what we do to provide services for people. I know that we come to the board and we talk about, we put pieces in place. These are the ladies that make sure it gets in place. And they also do multiple trainings with our ed techs on good practice, what needs to be done, what our assessments look like. Right now they're in MEA mode, making sure that all students have accommodations that need to have those accommodations. And so then they're excitingly, hopefully, plan for math and literacy night that's coming up. So I offer this opportunity for the board to ask any questions about our data of either of them.
Anybody have a question?
Well, I'll ask a question just because I want to make sure that I'm understanding this information correctly. So if I look at the Jumpstart for the summer class of 2017, all right, we started out with 29 students. 6 of them moved out of the district, 2 were retained. That's how we get to the 21 that are still in first grade currently.
Yep.
Out of those 21 that are in first grade, 10 of them are enrolled in Title I reading.
Yep.
7 of the students are enrolled in special education or RTI.
Yep.
Could those be one and the same, or there's one designation or the other?
It's one designation or the other.
Okay, so that's 17 out of the 21. So that means that 4 of the students that started in the program are just regular instruction now where they need to be?
Yep.
All right, perfect.
Yep.
And so one of the things that you will notice is that in that class of 2014, you can see that those numbers of students were much higher, right, that were meeting the end of the year proficiency levels. But that was the first year of the program, and the identification of the students has since been improved so that way we're getting at all of the right, more of the right kids for the program. Whereas that first year it wasn't. People weren't seeking it out. They didn't know as much. Yeah, they didn't know as much about it, and so we were trying to fill spots.
Yeah.
Whereas now we're getting students who, through kindergarten screening, are showing that they could really benefit from this. And so they may be students who weren't coming in quite as ready, but this is getting them more ready.
Kate. 2017. So you have your, I'm talking process now. So you have the kiddos go through kindergarten screening.
Yep.
At that time, based on the screening, have you determined whether students are special ed?
See, we also have the CDS screening. So Lisa gets a list of students who are already in CDS who require services the day they enter. So Jumpstart, we try not to invite anybody who already has had an intervention with CDS. We try to take that next layer of students because the students who are in CDS have already received support, most of them. Some have not. That's been the exception. If we have a student who's been identified and they have not received any services because there isn't enough people to provide them, and it's a speech language, we have sometimes in the past taken those students. So once we identify students that have 0 to 1 letter sound, we send our invites out and we keep working as people decide, nope, we don't want to spend that time in the summer. We invite the next student down. So there's a process that Melissa Bois does with the data and touches base with every parent.
But aside from the CDS and the little ones who've had some interventions, and you go, I'm just trying to get clarity on identification. So kindergarten screening, and typically you can flag a few kids that
based on their dial score and their letter sound identification and what they have for skills already with their dial score gives us percentiles against national norms, and then we can use that information to determine who would be the best candidates.
So when a child comes into screening, both of these ladies have these spreadsheets out. They go to the screening, they go to all the different pieces, they get scores, they input them in, and then we look at the columns for identification and pop those kids as quickly as they can. But it's the work that these two do to put all the information in correctly. They look at the concepts, they look at language, and the big one is the letter sounds. That's the one we're looking for our students.
I know I'm splitting hairs here. So when I'm looking at 7 of the students are enrolled in special ed RTI, that's after they've completed the program,
after
and then you determine?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. No, thank you.
And this does allow us to start that process a little bit sooner than we otherwise might, because we've had a first look at them when they've had an intervention already before they are even starting school.
And that's extremely important.
And when we talk about Jumpstart each year, we always say, here's where the child started, here's where they are at the midpoint, here's where they are at the end. If we're not seeing any growth, that's a flag for us to say, okay, here's this kiddo, they're in your room, we got to pay attention.
And we've had a lot of interventions already in this. Okay, I have a question first, Marge. 97%, I'm looking at the summer of 2018, 97% of the students were at level 4?
No, not the DRA. That's your letter sounds. So we do the letter sounds and letter naming at the beginning of kindergarten. And so we do the same screening with them when they leave Jumpstart.
Sure.
So we have one kid who missed it by 1, but everybody else was still there.
Okay. So. Marge?
So in actuality, the final tally of each one of these years is not necessarily saying that Jumpstart did not work for them, because we have X amount. A large portion of them are either in Title I reading, or they're in special ed, or they've been retained. What we've got is, as you said, we've gotten a jump start on these are the kiddos who really need more and earlier intervention than they might have been flagged much earlier.
Correct. I think one of the most compelling pieces for me being here and doing this so long are those conversations of those parents calling. I mean, 2 of the parents had students already in the program, and they're like, we know what this is. When do we sign them up? How do we get in there? And so I have to explain, we have to go through screening. And they're both like, yeah, I know, but we know it works. And they share. I think that's astounding that this community has embraced this program for our students.
I see one of the parents that their child was in the first cohort frequently, and they always say to me how wonderful that experience was. So,
and I did, for the board's knowledge, I did apply. The funds were available again this year, released by the DOE. Our application is in. I think it was the first one in. And hopefully last year we heard on April 27th. So I will send an update to you when I know if we're going to receive those funds. So.
Thank you for this. we hear about new programs from time to time, and we've heard about this and reported out on it, but we really didn't have any teeth to look at. We've heard the accolades, and apparently they're well deserved. So I thank both of you and Christine as well for your efforts. I love the fact that this has led to a system that I think will serve all of our students well long term. And I'm pretty pleased that we have this program in place. I think it's a good deal. So thank you all. Great.
You're welcome.
I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next, we wanted to talk about the sabbatical leave. You have a letter in your packet, I believe. And Mr. Neal, do you want to come up and talk to us? Thank you.
You will. I know.
It always happens when they get to me.
They get stuff.
Is this it?
Is it a little bit different?
Oh, okay. Great.
My original intent.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're on.
Thank you. Thank you for meeting me tonight. Want to be able to if you could just follow along with this, I'll go right through this, and hopefully the reason for my being here will be clear. I'm here specifically requesting a half-year sabbatical for the spring of 2020. A little bit about myself first, for those people that don't know me. I've been a resident of the town of Wyndham since 1999. I have a daughter that attends RSU 14 schools. It's my 26th year in education. Been employed at 2 area schools in that time period over my career. It's my 7th year presently teaching history at Wyndham High School. About 2 years ago, I made the decision that I wanted to be able to pursue a master's. And at that time period, I started taking on a part-time basis courses at USM. This past fall, I matriculated actually into the adult and higher education program at USM. In fact, just so that you have proof positive of that, the second page that you have in the letter that I gave you is my letter of actually acceptance within the program. And then the second page is just my transcript at this particular point of the coursework that I've taken so far, just so you have record of it's legit. The reason why I'm here tonight specifically is that in order for me to do the programming at the level and the pace that I kind of initially established for myself, when I started this process about 2 years ago, and looking at the program and the intensity of it, it was pretty obvious that I should probably only take 1 course per semester to be able to kind of maintain my professional responsibilities to the RSU, but also be able to do the best job I can with the programming that I was involved in at USM. Doing the math, that takes me 6 years to actually complete the master's. It's an arduous process, and in order to, again, kind of maintain a good balance between my responsibilities professionally to the district and the students here that I serve, also to the programming to make sure I can keep my eye on the ball with that, and also be a good dad at the same time. It's one of the reasons why I'm asking for the sabbatical for half a year, to be able to kind of fast track the process. With that being said, the coursework that I'm kind of proposing or putting at least out on the table at this particular point, this is all kind of contingent to as well on what is available at USM at that particular point. So I have 6 courses that I've pretty much been given assurances from the education department that they will be offered, and it's within the programming. So if I'm granted the sabbatical, what I would do is obviously take another course in the fall as I'm still teaching full-time at the high school, but then that spring semester of 2020, I'd be enrolled full-time. As far as USM and master's programs, that's 3 courses. That's what's considered as full-time. And within that smattering of 6 classes that you see there, I would take 3 of the courses, as long as they're available at that particular time period. As far as benefits to the RSU, specifically, a large percentage of the students that I presently work with and serve at the high school are not college traditional students. Many of them are going to require and need some type of post-secondary education beyond graduation. And that's something that's becoming more and more obvious too as well, and certainly in the coursework that I'm taking as well within the adult and higher education program. This is a trend that you're seeing not only just here in Maine but across the country as well. My ability to get out ahead of that per se, and my ability to kind of be versed in that and be able to help those students kind of prepare for that transition, I think, again, gets ahead of the curve a little bit. Certainly having an understanding of how adults learn directly as well, and having a more of an understanding of that myself helps me, again, prepare those students for the learning of the future that they're going to need. On top of that, I believe in mentoring and modeling the process of lifelong learning. I've been teaching for a long time. This gives me an opportunity to kind of, again, hyper-focus on my own development as a student and be able to model that for students. Additionally, I've been doing this long enough too to know that sometimes as a person in the classroom, whether it's not me just getting old, I don't know, but students are a little different. They learn differently. Certainly, I think with the technology and the things that they have access to in these days, and in a lot of ways, they're coming to me in my classroom every year being more and more adult, or seeming more and more adult. Every year, and my ability to hopefully reach out to them in a means that which is more adult-like, certainly in adult education. There's a lot more of a facilitator role. The idea of a sit and get, it's never really been my teaching style, but I'm finding it's become more and more necessary the longer I'm in the business. And certainly as students, I think, evolve and change in time, it's become more necessary for me to be a little bit more of that facilitator role and actually look at the student as an individual and kind of figure out what's the best program for them and treat them more adult-like, even though they're not adults yet. And they still need an awful lot of guidance and direction for sure. Also, lastly, if there's ever an opportunity within the district, certainly to be an adult educator role, I'd certainly like that opportunity. I'm not going anywhere as far as my teaching. I want to stay in Wyndham, the high school. I have an objective of making sure at least I see my daughter through. We've got quite a few years before we get to that point, but it's happening soon, and it's scary how fast it's happening. So that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions.
Okay. You may have any questions? Concerns? Marge?
I have a comment. We are extremely popular with the kids in high school. I do know that. And they look up to you. And I think I would be in favor of this because everybody should grow, as you say, and I think you should have as much opportunity as anybody else. It's a semester. It's not, you're not asking for a full year. And I would have no problem granting it. Yeah.
Thank you for your comments.
Just want to also point out to the board, I believe included in your packet is the language from the teacher contract, which is where you'll find sabbatical language. And within the teaching contract, the teaching association or the teaching group can ask for up to 2 sabbaticals to be approved each year. We don't have a large number of sabbaticals that typically come through this process. Jeff is the only one who's applying for sabbatical this year. He did go through the process of meeting with the sabbatical committee, which was me and the head of the teaching association, so that we could look through the applications, which we had won, but had a chance to also talk with Jeff and explore a little bit about what he's looking to do and what some of the objectives that he has for this particular process. And then that committee then makes the recommendation to the superintendent. So the language is not something to find in policy. The language is actually out of the teaching contract. So we've included that for you if you have questions about that process as well.
Thank you. Mrs. Bricks?
Since we're knee-deep in the budget, could you talk about the financial implication of a sabbatical?
Sure. In this case, we're looking at half salary for a semester. So if you think about it over the course of a year, it's almost quarter salary because you're looking half for half. And so, it has a small budgetary impact. that we're paying for that particular salary.
And do we budget a certain amount for sabbaticals each year?
We don't.
Or we do it on,
We
like, once
don't.
we know of a request, we put it in for that exact
Correct.
amount. So the exact amount is in the budget, or
Correct. The
as
correct
close as
exact
we can
amount that's in there. There's a deadline that the individual, and the deadlines that are in there are actually deadlines for the district and not necessarily deadlines for the association, just to make sure that we have time to make sure that if it is something that's going to have a budgetary implication, that we can have that in there. So that's why the timelines are set. So Jeff gave his intent at the beginning of January. The committee is supposed to meet by March, and that committee is then supposed to inform us so that we can include it into our budget. I'm just thinking over the time that I've been in the RSU, I can only think of maybe 2 or 3 sabbaticals that have been granted over the course of the years, and actually just a handful that have actually ever been requested. So it's not something we do very often or are asked to do.
March?
You said in our present budget also is the sub in the present budget,
Correct.
the money for
The
the
cost of doing that.
sub. And I just want to make one more statement because, well, Kate and I were here for other sabbaticals, and it was a very big, I think, a big benefit. I'm terrible on names.
We had a math teacher and we had 2 psychs.
Right.
And I can remember.
So I think it's been very advantageous to us as a district. They brought a lot back to them.
Okay.
I'm excited that you came and asked, first of all. It's just really cool to get to see this sort of a request and to get to see somebody that, a lot of us are familiar with your name because the kids do love you. And we hear it, which is a good thing. It's much better than we know you because our kids are miserable in your class. So it's a good thing. But it's really cool to have somebody that they already look up to now saying, I want to go model this. I want to do this and show you that, it doesn't stop. And
Yeah.
so I'm incredibly thankful that you even came and asked and really seem to have a good plan and solid. And
Thank you.
we need more like you.
I agree. Mrs. Brooks?
I was pretty fascinated by your comment about how the high schoolers are becoming more adult-like. And some of your comments have really resonated with me in that this is addressing perhaps a different kind of learner. And, our motto is success for all. So I'm hopeful that what you bring back will be a benefit to our students for those who don't follow the traditional track, because they're as important as anybody else.
I like the new definition of success, the definitions of what it is to be successful. Meeting the needs of kids who are not in the college prep program, for example, is very important. And other adult learners, very important. So thank you. Right now we've had this information. Thank you for the presentation. We will mull it. And our vote is next time we're together. I'm not seeing a lot of no's, but our actual vote is next. I think it's next week.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes, sir. Sorry.
So the proposed coursework that you would like to do, it says that you're looking at 4 classes, or if they are available, 4 classes.
3 within the semester for the sabbatical. So what I've been doing, basically taking 1 semester course each semester. So next year, even while I'm still teaching here, I would be taking 1 course. The 3 that I would be taking during the sabbatical would be within the listing that you have here, because that's all USM allows me to take is to be a full-time student is 3 courses.
All right. And for graduate programs, do they go by credits?
Yes.
How many credits would that 4 classes be?
What you're looking at is 12.
12 credits. Okay,
Right.
so all right, that is a full-time gig. All right, that's all I have.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Right. We are now to the public forum on the 2019-2020 budget. And if we have any public who would like to forum, let's see. We have one. Ms. Bork, will you please come in? Come on down.
You want to sit here or up?
Wherever you feel more comfortable.
Okay, it's been a long day. Thank you for having a public forum. I'm a Raymond resident. Some of you know me, some of you don't. I'm here tonight. I'm very involved in the Raymond community. I'm president of the library board. I also serve on the Moon Echo Land Trust Board. I'm involved in our steering committee with Age Friendly Raymond. I've been working with your folks over here to get that off the ground. I believe in the power of community. And I'm also a Raymond person here. Now hold your seats. Suggesting that you spend money. I know it's hard to believe. And the reason I'm here is I've had the great pleasure of working with a young lady by the name of Lynette Hayne. She has brought forward a position called Director of Community Connections. Lynette reached out to me last year, because my name's sort of around town, about the possibilities of developing opportunities out in the real world for the kids. I was thrilled to sit down and talk. Also, there's so many possibilities. I was a little dismayed to find that maybe her position won't be carried forward in the budget. I'm here to urge you to strongly reconsider that. And one of the reasons is, in this world today, we need to come together, and having an RSU person in the community, out there, hand in hand, visible, contributing in the community with the kids, I think is going to go a long way. For example, Lynette volunteered to work with us on an environmental education program on the land this summer. And what that involved is my watershed association, Crescent Lake Watershed Association, is going to provide the funds. Moon Echo Land Trust is going to co-sponsor. And we're going to do it in the Raymond Community Forest right there in Raymond. And Lynette's going to be our instructor. She doesn't know this yet, but Portland Water District has also stepped up to get involved in this process, which means we're going to be able to take even more kids out. My hope was I could put RSU 14 Community Connections Director as the instructor, trying to get the name out there, trying to get RSU 14 in my community visible for positive things. I'm a taxpayer in Raymond, and I watch you guys on TV all the time. And I have to say, I'm thankful and impressed with the work that you do. Just tonight, look at what we talked about. We talked about embracing change, and I know we're in the midst of another one between Raymond and Wyndham, but I believe we can make a difference by getting us out there in the community. And Lynette is an excellent representative. She's got an energy and enthusiasm that I haven't seen in a long time. She's hard to keep up with, let me just put it that way. And again, I really feel that we can build strong relationships together, whether it's Lynette with that position, or position, whatever you want to call it. But to get that out, not only over here on the Wyndham side, but out into Raymond, with that tagline that the RSU is involved in doing these things in our community. I think it's incredibly important. And within Raymond, there's a whole other universe going on out there, and that's in community building. And I think we're making progress. It's a struggle. It's all volunteer driven, as you probably would suspect in Raymond. We have no town funding. This is all coming out of the hearts of the people that live there, and I think Lynette can be a big part of that. So I know money's always the issue. It always is. But if you could find it somewhere in the budget, I really think it would have a positive long-term impact on what's going on in the community. It's not going to turn the tide of some of the challenges that the RSU faces. I'm not pretending that for a minute, but I think it can make a difference, and it can make a difference to the people that live and breathe every day in that community, and what it means to them. I'm working right now with Jordan Small. Their kids are designing an irrigation system for an age-friendly garden. We find so many different ways that we can work together. And I think we need to continue to do that. So thank you for your time. And I really want to say I appreciate everything you guys do. I don't have kids, never have had kids, but I've voted for every tax increase for schools in my entire life, because what you do is where it's at. It's the future. So, and I believe in it, and I believe in the way the two communities should work together. Thank you.
Thank you
Can I
very
answer
much.
questions? I think. No,
Did you have a no?
okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I'll sit as well. Good evening. My name's Allison Reynolds Marathieu, and I'm actually a high school math teacher at Wyndham High and part of the RSU. And I recently just got asked this year to both be the Interact Rotary Club advisor as well as the co-advisor for the class of 2019. So service and getting our kids ready to be beyond our high school has flooded my brain, as well as teaching 5 classes, having an advisory, grading, planning, scheduling, and also I'm newly married and dealing with that. So there's a lot in my life going on. And
You're not watching, right?
oh gosh, no. But when I think about the students that the RSU is creating, molding, and influencing, we just pushed for a huge initiative for the capstone project instead of community service, to push students into getting their hands dirty and discovering something new. And if I were asked to watch over my advisory for the 14 kids and find an individual job for each one of them, I would not do them service. And I will admit that. I am focused on teaching my 5 classes, dealing with my new husband, grading, scheduling, calling parents, and I would do the future of RSU 14 if I were to specialize that, not the best of my ability. I tried my hardest, but they wouldn't be the kids that we'd hope for. And I think that a lot of our staff feel that way too. And so when we created the capstone project and we were able to bring in a person whose focus for the high school, not just the district, but for the high school, was to be in classrooms. She's been in 3 of my classes to talk about capstone projects, volunteer opportunities, and what the experience looks like. She's already emailed me a couple of times about what my Interact Club can do to go out and sponsor my community, our community together. And she's creating opportunities for volunteer work with the middle school, with hopefully the elementary school next year. And it's been a year. Only a year. And she's created such an impact for our high school students who are petrified to get their hands dirty. She's created such an impact for our middle school students who are very excited to join the high school. And she's created a community herself of kids who are willing to ask questions, be curious, and explore the world around them. So I am also here to talk about the Director of Community Connections, Lynette Hayne. Because I think it's really important that we continue to support this movement of getting our kids involved within our community, because they've got the tag of RSU 14, and we should be incredibly proud of them when they leave us. And if we can continue to build a support system for the student, no matter what level, and I'm a high school teacher, I live in my high school bubble, but I can already see the influence that she's doing at lower levels. Kids are excited to come here and start exploring, start volunteering. There's talk of creating an Interact volunteer club at the middle school, getting middle school kids out into the community and serving. And it's just inspiring to go down to her office and see the posters on her walls, the sticky notes everywhere of all of these great ideas that she has. We've got kids excited about being a radio talk show host. We've got kids inspired about going into nursing homes and nursing programs. We've got kids inspired to working with business marketing. And it's because Lynette and this position takes the time to focus on what every student needs. And clearly it's not just in the high school, it's everywhere. But she's got the energy, the enthusiasm, and the passion to do this job correctly. And I think it would be a huge disservice if we were to stop that after 1 year. If we're going to invest in our kids for the future, we need to invest in this position as well. And I think that's really important to consider in the budget. I hope I haven't taken your time. Or have any questions, I am welcome to answer them. But I think that this is something that students, teachers, parents in the community are all asking for, and we have it, and we should not let it go.
And this was not coordinated.
No, this was great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well spoken.
Thanks. Thanks for your energy as well.
Because they spoke, I feel like I should say a few words. I'm Lynette. I'm the director of Community Connections. Nice to meet you. Just a couple of things. You've all gotten a lot of letters, I've heard, and there may be a couple more people showing up from what I've heard that are hoping to say a few things. But when Allison says it's only been a year, it's actually only been 6 months. The position, because of how messy it all came about, which messy isn't always bad because this position is really, really good. It's only been 6 months that it's even existed. And it's brand new, and as with any new position, a lot of that time was spent even figuring out what it needed to look like to be valuable. So what you've read and who you've talked to and all of that is really just scratching the surface of what a position like this can do for the RSU. So just imagine if you find a way to keep the position, what can happen if I or someone is in this role in 3 years or 5 years or however many years down the road. If that can happen in 6 months while still figuring out what the job needs to be, what can happen? And if you need ideas, I do have many. Do you have any questions for me?
I don't think so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public want to opine?
I think this is the public selection.
I know.
The most we've had in a long time.
Yeah.
So it's great.
Usually it's empty when I ask that question.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for the public part of this. Thank you. Thank you. Now we are moving on to the 2019-2020 budget discussion. Okay, did you have some information for us, Mr. Howell, or?
Janet?
Yeah.
Should we make a comment that we did receive multiple?
I will when we begin that part of the discussion. I will. Sorry.
Public comments. What? I said they were public comments, but they're not yet.
Okay.
So let me, I know there's a sheet that's going around. Just want to take, because this is the board's really first chance to go ahead and deliberate on the budget. I mean, to this point, you've heard all of your administrators come in, have had a chance to kind of talk about their individual cost centers. And while we've gone through the process, there's been some questions that have come up from some board members. And also, as we've mentioned in previous board meetings, behind the scenes, Stacy and I have been making adjustments to the budget as we find whether there be an error in a position, or there's things that we know for changes, or we find out about retirements that we've been looking to make those changes. So the budget books that all of you have in front of you, and the budget books which the public started out with, that was version 6. Version 8 is the version that we're working on, and we are also, to the extent that we can, keeping the website up to date for changes as they occur, so that the public will be able to kind of follow our process as well, so that they can see the most up-to-date numbers. So some changes since the last time that we met, and some of you have received this communication, maybe others of you haven't. When we initially did the budget, and the most recent version of the budget you saw, we had held health insurance at 10%. We received notification this past week that not our individual health percentage, but we were told that districts that have the greatest number of incidents or the greatest number of claims, that the highest rate was going to be 7%. Last year, the highest number was 9%, and our insurance fell in around 3.9. This year, with the highest being 7, if one were to extrapolate, which can be a little dangerous, but we should be somewhere in that 3 to 4% range. We won't know that number until April 4th. But so that's one thing that we can do a reduction on with the budget. District-wide, also we've had notifications of at least 5 retirements that are going to take place. And so we've gone through and we've adjusted the budget down. And so the $122,800 that you see there are some of those reductions down. Also on this budget journey, one thing that we've learned as we've learned about some of our more challenged or some of our newest learners, they're going to have some things they're going to have to overcome, that we're going to need some additional support for a minibus to handle transportation. A minibus, we are doing a 5-year lease on our buses with those, so that's $12,000. There was some additional SPED money added back, or special education money for Katahdin for $10,000. And then there was an adjustment made to the high school MacBook lease, which is that we had received a grant to reduce the cost of that program. That grant was not applied to the budget this year. And so that grant has been applied to next year's budget, so that's a savings of $18,400. So really those ones where I've gone to now from version 8 possible changes, those are things we've already made within version 8. In addition, there have been some questions about the board about what does it look like for a special education program. Many of our students, and Lisa's here tonight to answer questions, but many of our students who had been traveling from Raymond to Wyndham Primary School, right now looking at what would a program look like in Raymond. In the meantime, since we started this discussion, we're finding that the needs of students that are coming into the program are a whole lot greater, and the number of students who have significant needs are greater. And I think we're beyond the point where we're exploring a program in Raymond. I think we're here at a point, and Lisa can talk about this, that we need a program in Raymond because of the needs that are taking place. With that, and Lisa, I'm going to have you kind of talk through the rest, but there's some additional positions that are there. But before she does that, I think, Mark, they're actually right on the end of the table. Before Lisa talks about the special ed, in addition to the minibus, we are also going to need a couple additional van drivers, and also going to need a couple additional vans. And that's not 2 vans for $14,000. That's a lease purchase payment on vans, probably looking at a 3-year lease for a used van for those. But Lisa, if you want to talk about the special education portion.
Sure. So I come on the heels of very excited teachers. So while they speak about, so who was I behind? Jeff, these awesome special teachers from the high school. So I feel like an advertisement, right? So if Wyndham Raymond RSU 14 is the place to be, and word's gotten out. And so we are, despite what the numbers might want to tell you, we are just getting families day after day after day. Since I've been here, the last time with transportation, just in that limited time, we have had several new families move in with students with that have IEPs, and so just those students alone are impacting the numbers from what I had previously presented to you. We have a couple little fellows with students with one-on-ones, a student in and out of district placement, but they're all new, families to us. So we're excited to welcome them, but at the same time, it also shifts the numbers where we thought we might have been able to get by with what we had. So Chris is right. I've spent more time than Bill Hansen would probably like to spend with me, but we really looked at the map of Wyndham Primary School. I met with Kyle, Dr. Rhodes, and then his staff, Julie Young and Marissa, my staff, and really tried to figure out what's available. And given the current numbers at Wyndham, irregardless of the fact that there are current Raymond students there, we're looking at the need of having 4 special education classrooms. We have a high population of students with autism next year and a high population of students with some behavioral challenges. So we're going to even have to look at the way we structure things. In addition to coming before you, I also have, so we have about 4 kids from Raymond, new students coming in Raymond, more than that, but kids we're sort of got our eye on. 4 existing students in the Wyndham Primary School. And then we've also gotten calls. So as Christine's gotten calls, myself and Missy have gotten calls about new families, mostly actually existing families in Raymond, but having new members of their families. So we've got some new kiddos moving in, some who are not identified, but suspect that they are going to need some services. We also have some students who are in and out of district placement that if we had a space, whether it would be Raymond or Wyndham, we could bring them back. And so that would help cut cost as well. So I met with Chris and Stacy and Bill again today, and we really looked at where are we. And so in order for us to meet the needs of our smallest learners, those are the incoming K as well as the existing K to 3 group, we do have to look at supporting a program in Raymond that will meet the needs of the incoming kids as well as the some of the students that are already in our district in other locations, and then really look at Wyndham. We talked, Kate, about doing some observations. So both Misty and Marissa have been out doing observations. They're not complete. Our plan is to meet this coming Friday and again on Monday, so we can come back on the 11th with some more specific information. But just to give you an example, Marissa observed 7 students. All 7 students have one-on-ones, and based on our observations and experience, 5 of those students are going to need one-on-ones. And I only asked you for 5, thinking that out of the 25 students that we knew that had one-on-ones, we could get it down to 5. And as Chris said, they're sweet, precious babies coming into our school, but they do need more support than we could do with shared. So in order for me to provide them with the special education programming under our requirement for FAPE, I have to come back and ask for some more help, both geographically, so really utilizing the space that's available at Raymond, as well as maximizing space at Wyndham, so we can try to one, make physical space for some of the kiddos, but then also meet the needs of kids within the school building where they reside. I think that makes sense. So, and it impacts everything. It impacts getting them back and forth to school. So the vans that's why the vans. And then in meeting with Mike and Chris, having that minivan will allow us to pick up, a few more kids than just the 4 that we typically are able to put in a van with car seats and all that kind of stuff. So we have put back in the budget a special ed teacher, so this would be for Raymond, and based on what I'm seeing right now, I'm going to need this whether you put it at Raymond or you put it at Wyndham Primary, just because the law, special ed law, also limits the number of students that can be in a self-contained classes, and at that K-5 level with an ed tech it's 10. So we really can't have any more than 10, and we're already looking at, with what we have plus what's incoming, we're at 40 at Wyndham Primary, separate from the Raymond students. So we put 7 ed techs in the back of the budget, and as I understand for Chris, 2 of those were earmarked for the Katahdin program. Again, one of those things is we're looking at limitations of the Katahdin program is being able to have staff to go out in the community and support the IEPs of those students that have secondary goals that would require them to be outside of the physical building at Wyndham High School. The physical therapist is a new position. That's the 0.5 in order to do the program at Raymond. So we think with a half-time physical therapist, so I might have to contract for that. But our hope is that we could contract or hire somebody in a 0.5 position that would be willing to work with our families and students in Raymond. And then the occupational therapist would also be, so Lori Fletcher is our current OT in Raymond, and she was gracious enough to agree to increase her hours if there's a program in Raymond, and so that's what that request is, to allow her to work some extra days, or like a day and a half, so they don't have to hire a new person, just increase her hours. So, and then the other OT that was in the budget is still needed to support our friends coming in. You know, the other thing that's different about our friends coming in is that you guys have heard me preach about the shortage of CDS services. So we're seeing kids IEPs with, 120 minutes of speech, 90 minutes of OT, 60 minutes of PT, and then specially designed instruction in a self-contained program. And so those are pretty heavy services for us to bring in at that, at that level and cover with our existing staff. So,
what about speech?
So speech, I have an extra speech in the in my original budget that I requested at Raymond. Sally Plummer would be, so she would be full-time in Raymond. Right now she does 4 days in Raymond and 1 day at Manchester. So with the addition of the new person that's in the other budget, I can make it work.
So you don't need it.
I don't need another one.
Okay.
So the out-of-district placement, what do those cost?
So they range between $65,000 and $70,000 a year. And so, that's the base rate.
Sure.
I think I provided you guys the daily rates before. So, I used to use 55, now I use 70. It's pretty,
sure.
That's probably middle of the road. And then that's the transportation of that,
sure.
Janny, as well.
Right.
So, most of those programs are like Margaret Murphy in Saco, Margaret Murphy in Auburn, Spurwink, Portland. Yeah. It's a good hour drive for most of those kids. So we save that in terms of fuel.
Sure.
Still need the driver and the van, but just different, going to a different location, right?
Right. Marge?
This is probably you, Chris. I'm trying to figure what the numbers are like next to the motor fuels to the right of the 5,000.
Total of the.
So what that represents is the total of
how much I'm asking.
The 439 total. The 14741 represents the 439, and then subtract the savings that you see up above.
Okay.
So right now with those changes in version 8, it's 140,741 addition to the budget.
No.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just wondering for the program in Raymond, just clarify any modifications, any to the building?
No, the super thing is we're ready to go, right? Unlike so I'll talk about Wyndham Primary in a minute, but the super cool thing about Raymond is we already have the wing, and Jenny knows because her classroom was down there, and so the kids come in through the kindergarten entrance. I've met with Beth. There's a classroom available we've actually been using for another student. It's right next to the therapist room. So from me to Janny to the therapist rooms with OT, PT, speech. And then we also have I don't know if they call it a bonus room, but a break room if kids need, to have that quiet space. That's right there as well. And so the classroom is big enough that we could easily house, 10 students. I mean, not that we'd probably be starting at 9, but, house those students. And not that they would be there all day long. So I don't want the public to think that we're starting this program in Raymond to put kids in a room and they would stay there all day. Just the opposite. Our intent is that we would be able to have them for those students currently attending Wyndham Primary, have them in the class just as much as they are now, but at the same time have a space with trained staff. And then I also have some of the students need nursing services. So we've got Courtney at, so you were gracious that I have 2 RNs. So I have a nurse at Raymond Elementary School and a nurse at Jordan Small. So we have that already covered at no addition, no new cost. So it's really a win-win. We've got plenty of desks. The supply side would be on me to, fund that program, and we would look to do that out of local entitlement, not at a cost to the taxpayers, but it's just the staff that I need to get it open and running.
Marge?
I'm pointing at you.
3 hands that went up.
We'll start with Marge and go down the line. Yeah. Okay.
Under the bear, is that social worker? Is that yours or is that?
No, that's
we're not there yet.
We're not there yet.
We're not.
It's not under.
What do they say? Stay in your lane, Marge.
I only asked.
Okay.
Anna?
Sorry. I just want to say, every time you leave, I always think, gosh, I should talk to Lisa, because I think it's important. We look at these numbers and we see, these dollar signs, and we hear a bunch of numbers. But I just want to tell you, and I hope that you'll share with your team, I know people that have moved here because of you and your team. And that makes more work and it makes bigger numbers, but it means what you're doing is amazing.
Thank you.
And what you're doing it well, and people know that, and it's so appreciated. So
I
hope
really
that
appreciate you saying that. And so if I could brag for just a minute, it's a couple of reasons. Is one, all of you. So from the moment I arrived here, I felt supported. So I felt supported by Sandy and Dawn before Chris, and now Chris, and I've always felt supported by you in the community. And when you feel support, you can do good things for kids, because I do this because of kids. And so I'll share with you two things. The DOE came and did their site visit last Wednesday. Oh my God, we got the best site visit ever.
That's great.
I'm super excited. Can't wait for the report, right? But it wasn't about that. They had the opportunity to view two locations. The Bridges was doing their brunch, so for any of you who came to that, they were so impressed with the Bridges staff and the Bridges students and how articulate they were about what they're learning, and they had cooked breakfast, and it was a super big deal. The DOE was just in awe. And then my other group went down to the primary school, and so they got to see some of our new friends as well as our programs. And the comment from one Dan, who works at DOE, he's like, "Oh my God, I didn't even want to leave. I wanted to stay there all day and teach." Right? Great. So we have a lot of really good learning going on, and so thank you for saying that, because sometimes it doesn't always feel that way at the end of the day. So I do appreciate you saying that.
And the other thing I wanted to say, and I apologize if I don't have all the politically correct terminology.
That's okay.
But I'm really excited at the prospect of bringing this program sort of back to Raymond. I remember when I was in elementary school, a lot of the kids that needed assistance, needed the special ed programming, were in a classroom, and that's where they stayed all the time. But when they came to our school, that was when we started to get to know them. I remember being one of a couple of kids that would volunteer to go down there. And suddenly we were making connections, and we were making friends, and they were part of their community. So this gives us the chance to do that with these kids, and I think that's really, really exciting.
Thank you. And so I always start with the motto, there are RSU 14 students first. They just happen to need something different. And so that's my job, is to try to make sure that we have the staff and come and advocate for them on what they need. So I appreciate your support.
I mean, it's a service for our traditional education students that are at RES to get to know these kids and get to have them there with them every day. So it's really
well, and they're super cool kids. Like Chris has gotten to know some of them at primary school, and they are super cool. We just love them to pieces. So we're excited to have the opportunity to shorten their commute.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Scott, did you have a question for me?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
This, maybe you can answer it, but I'm kind of curious. So does this have any impact on Bill's thing here for the Wyndham Primary School?
This is actually one of the things that we talked about in our meeting today, which is that Wyndham Primary School still has challenges for speech space, occupational therapy space, physical therapy space, and we are still going to need to make some renovations to make sure that our professional staff actually have the room and the space to actually meet with kids, because one thing we're finding with this incoming group is that it is much larger than any other group that we have, and so removing 8 students from the system still does not solve the overcrowding issues that we have with professional service space that need to be overcome. And so one of the things we talked about, regardless of what's going on, we still need to address some of those issues through capital.
Okay. Do you think that he's going to need as much capital?
Well, I think we're going to see some adjustment to that based upon the major reconstruction that we talked about with the nursing space is just not going to happen, because we just don't have the time in the 2-month construction window that we have in order to complete that. So there still will be some things, and Bill will be coming back to facilities to talk about some of those items, but we still need to do some renovations for Wyndham Primary. And just for the public to know, Wyndham Primary School is a great school. Wyndham Primary School opened in 1991, which means it started design in 1986. And the number of services and things that schools were being asked to provide in 1986 and the space allocations that were made in 1986 are very, very different than the space allocations and services that schools are providing today. And so many of those spaces were not built into that building. And so closets, storage spaces, any possible space has been now converted over to intervention space or meeting space, and even hallways.
Yeah, and I can give you an example, Scott. So in the past, I had speech therapists that shared a room. So it might be like the size of your boardroom with a divider down the middle, and that was sufficient because we could do, two groups on each side or one individual on each side, and our needs of our students are changed. So for example, we have a number of students who we already have and additional ones coming in who have communication devices, and so these are nonverbal students who might have a Dynavox that they have to push the PECS system, and then they push the button and the voice thing talks. So we do that therapy obviously in isolation initially, and if you've got the teacher talking and the voice talking, and on the other side you have a group talking, it's really distracting to be able to conduct that therapy session. And so that's why we had to really go to the office spaces more this year, and then we need those office spaces for next year. So these are the kids with 90 minutes a week of speech, and our speech therapists are amazing, and just having the kids are making huge growth, but at the same time, just in order to deliver the service, it needs to be in a private setting for some of their instruction. And then we bring them into group setting, to transition for one of their sessions or two of their sessions. But those are sort of the challenges that we face. And so in meeting with Bill and the team at the primary school, in part because some of our kiddos have wheelchairs or walkers or that sort of thing, we also have to make sure that it's not just a table and a chair with a teacher. You got to make sure that there's enough space to get the walker around, or if there's more students that they can get out if there was a fire, if one's using a walker. So we end up needing bigger space than what some of the initial thoughts. So that's why he's kind of restructured that speech space to make sure that each person has enough room. But we did go back and look at it, so it's minimal construction now. And Kyle was gracious. I can only speak, highly of he and Julie and Diana and Rebecca when they met with us. And we just moved people around to really accommodate the needs of the special ed population.
Do you mind if I ask a follow-up?
Go right ahead.
So, how long have you been serving as this capacity?
As a director?
Yes.
I think I became a director in 2010 or 2011.
Okay.
Prior to that, I was a strategist.
All right. So, in the 9 years that you have been doing this, what is the biggest challenge that you have faced over the course of the years as the years progress?
That's like a dinner conversation. If I have to pick one, I think it's what we're dealing with right now, right? Because at the end of the day, if we polled the audience and asked anybody, they would always tell us that the priority is kids. It's finding that balance, finding the balance between meeting our legal obligation of what we have to provide for special ed services, not just meeting the basic needs, but really helping that whatever those students are to grow, and then being fiscally responsible to the taxpayers. And so I personally live by the Dave Ramsey model, when the money's gone, it's gone. But special ed doesn't always allow us to do that. So I think that's, part of the deal. I'm always negotiating with Chris. So if I take this, can I have, and so I think that's the monetary piece is the biggest challenge, because in districts our size, we're lucky that we get, a substantial money from local entitlement. But as you've seen in the dollar amounts that I've shared with you, we also have a high population of students that are out of district. It's not really a percentage in terms of comparing to other districts of our size. It's actually quite small, but those add up pretty quick when you start doing $70,000 ticket items. Right. Those add up. So
out of your total budget, then, how much would you say do you get help from the state that actually goes towards special education?
So right now, off the top of my head, I don't know it exactly, but I would say it's like $829,000 I get in local entitlement, or the district gets in local entitlement grant.
Pete, what's the percentage on that?
I didn't understand what you were.
So out of how much is my budget? $3 million.
What I am really curious about is the percentage that you used to get from the state back when you started.
Yes.
Compared to now.
It's much higher in this district and others. So to put in perspective, before I came here, I was the director in Pittsfield. I got 100. It's a SAD 53. We got like 159,000. It was my whole local entitlement, the whole thing. So.
Okay.
So that was also 9 years ago.
No, that was 5 years ago. 5 years ago.
All right.
Fewer kids.
Oh yeah, significantly smaller district. Yeah.
Much less kids.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just trying to wrap my head around it.
It's hard to.
It's hard.
Yeah.
Pete?
Yeah.
All right, and so I just want to make sure that I'm clear on this. It's about $440,000 for the special ed program, Raymond Elementary.
But that also includes 2 ed techs from Katahdin.
Okay, and so that figure, does that reduce anything that was allocated for Wyndham, or is this straight all additional money?
That's straight all additional money based on what we know right now. Because my original budget that I had given to Chris, the one that even got before you guys, included this. It actually included 9 ed techs based on what our process is. And when Chris picked himself up off the floor and said, try again, that's honest. That's when I only brought. Sorry, Chris is gonna have to get used to me. That's when we cut it to 5, hoping, but we knew that was a long shot.
And like Scott said, I mean, it's hard to get your head wrapped around all of this and the requirements and what's mandated and what's not. And so, if you can help me out a little bit,
sure.
To dumb it down, if a student moves into the district that requires one-on-one, does that mean that we automatically have to add the staff?
Correct. I have 3 openings right now at Wyndham Primary School, in part due to that reason.
So, and there's no limit to it. If people keep moving in, we are required to keep adding staff.
Yes, sir. And you cannot ask them to stay out of school until you hire somebody. So we have to bring them in and implement their IP within 10 days. So, yeah. And it's the same thing with an out of district. So kids move, at another district places them out of district. We go do the observation. They moved, they've moved to Wyndham, and we could bring them back, but I have no space. So they stay in their out of district placement because I need a one-on-one for them.
So I just want to add also, Scott, to your question, though, in addition to the $800,000 that Lisa receives in local entitlement, we also receive close to $7 million through EPS formula on our 279 towards the cost of special education.
Yeah, they don't let me deduct that.
Yeah.
You want to go toe to toe here? They don't let me deduct my revenues either. Just saying. Just saying. So
fair enough.
I bring billing money in that I don't get credit for. If you want me to do the Dave Ramsey, that money should go back in my envelope.
Nice try.
Nice try, Mrs. Brooks.
I too need a little clarity.
Sure.
So I'm trying to formulate it in my mind as well. We were originally going to service all of these students, the 54 that we knew of at the time.
Correct.
In Wyndham.
Correct.
Okay. Now we're proposing, because of additional students, we're going to do a Raymond. So how many, is it strictly Raymond resident students that will be in Raymond?
Yes, as of right now.
As of right now. So did I hear you say there's going to be 9 students up there?
To start, yeah.
To start, and the ratio is 1 to 10 legally?
Yes. There can't be more than 10
in a room.
In a room, yeah.
Right.
And include some ed techs.
I'm connecting the dots.
Yes. Yep. You're doing great.
Oh, thanks.
I'm on the same page as you.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess where I'm going with this, and my concern is, and clearly there's the need from all angles, legally, the needs of the students, etc., for having a program in Raymond. And you don't have a crystal ball, neither do any of us sitting up here.
Correct.
Talk to me a minute about when you move these students up to Raymond, what wiggle room will we have in Wyndham?
So what it will do is, by adding the new staff to Raymond, it will free up the existing staff that are working. So 4 ed techs that are currently working with Raymond students will still stay. Those positions will stay in Wyndham Primary and be absorbed. Then they'll be assigned to some of the new students. The other things that it will allow us to do is to look at a couple students that are currently in out-of-district placements, and we would recommend bringing those back. I mean, it's an IP team determination, and I can't make that as my own person, but we would have options, and based on previous, we would have options. The other thing that speaks to what Pete is saying is we now would have the opportunity as students move in, because we know there will be move-ins, to hopefully absorb those. But our hope will be that with the addition of the Raymond, and honestly, if I'm candid with you, it doesn't matter whether we put the program in Raymond or you keep it in Wyndham. I'm still going to need all these extra people than what we'd originally said. Right. And so it's really a cost savings to
have them
back in Raymond. And so by doing that, we open up some slots. So we're, as I told Chris today, and Bill, we potentially would be looking at 5 self-contained classes if we didn't move the program to Raymond, which then impacts Scott, the building, and then we would really have to be looking at where we're putting kids, kind of thing. And it didn't make sense where we have the space and the majority of the staff in Raymond. I mean, the core, right?
I guess where I'm going is you have a superb program and the word is out. And so I definitely can see the need for moving this up. And I'm really grateful that you came before us now to tell us this. And because what I didn't want to happen is to get to the end of August or September and then we're in crisis. Because we, don't have the space, we don't have the personnel. You're having trouble getting ed techs to begin with. We need the gift of time to be able to hire to service these students. So I'm hearing that you would have 1 slot in Raymond.
Yeah, and potentially
I'm wound up on the 1 to 10
thing.
So
don't get too don't fetch up on that too much, because the other option that we have so I have 2 other special ed teachers in Raymond, right? Which now gives us even more options. And so if we should have a student who needed to be in a special education setting for the majority of their day, that can happen. But I also have the ability that if there's a self-contained classroom, if there's a student, let's say Chris was one of my other special ed teachers, if there was a student on his caseload that also needed some behavioral support or needed time away from the classroom, there's now a place to go where it's staffed, which we don't have at all in Raymond right now. And so there's really this, what I envision is this fluid movement, just like we do at Wyndham Primary. So, the kids have adult support, so they're in the regular classroom with their typically developing peers as much as they can be. They're at recess and lunch with their class, they're at specials with their class, and then there's always a home base. So, these kids have lots of services. So by having a case manager is why we keep it to 10, is so you're working with all the service providers, and these are also typically families in my experience that have a lot of outside support. So if there's an outside case manager or different people that needed to be invited to the IP or what sort of thing, all that coordination happens as well. So for me, it just creates more options for students at Raymond Elementary.
And also, I'm a huge proponent of students being in their hometown.
Yeah.
And so I'm thrilled that Raymond special ed students will be with their peers in their neighborhood, in their hometown school.
Yeah. And with the high needs.
Right.
Marge?
The one thing about special ed, it's not like your regular classrooms. So I know when you say you need X amount of people, you have the flexibility that one of the regular classes doesn't have. They can't take math or science teachers or whatever and just move them willy-nilly, whatever. But you have the flexibility of saying, okay, I have this many children, I have this much staff, and you'll move them as
based on need. Correct. And they know that. All my staff are great, and they know
that's
that.
Always worked good.
Yeah, that sort of your question, Pete. Like if I have a new student move in and we've had to do this in the past where, has significant needs and I need somebody who's safety care trained and, maybe it's a male student who needs issues with pottying, then I've got to look at who are my male ed techs and, I got to make sure that need is covered and, it's like a chessboard. You're always moving somebody to make sure you've got somebody else covered. So
it's like a 3-dimensional chess.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. Does anybody else have any?
So I just wanted to also tell you, so you had asked me, to try to come back before the 11th. So we're, Godla Merce and her team, and Misty, they're out observing. And so I do plan to meet with them on Friday to talk about, or next week to talk about, their observations, and then we'll get back I'll come back to you before the last meeting.
Good. So
I'll be back again.
Good. Ooh.
I'll be back. And if you think of any questions, let me know.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, let's move on to the variables. I had asked Chris, or I had told Chris that I was very interested in finding out more information about how much it would be to add in a social worker and to also add in the community connections back into the budget. I'll speak to the social worker first. I realize that this may not be the year for it, but one of my first months on this school board, there was a suicide death of a child who was 10 years old. Not in our district, obviously, but in another district in Maine. Since then, the rise of suicide in Maine is higher than it is nationally. In the opioid use or deaths by opioid use, it is twice what it is nationally per 100,000. Those are issues that are extremely important as we can go forward. I am. And that's why I think we needed to have a social worker at the middle school and at Wyndham Middle School and Manchester. But given the realities of this budget and the fact that I really firmly believe that we should keep Lynette and her position, I think that I'll have to say, unless I have a wellspring of people who want to add a social worker, but I do think we need to re-examine the needs of all of our students, and that's one of them. So I'll move on to Lynette, unless you wanted to say something, Pete. No.
I'll say it after that discussion.
Okay. All right. The Director of Community Connections, I received, and I know I passed on quite a few emails from people about Ms. Hain and how wonderful the program is that she is doing for the communities and for the schools. I received one from the Gorham school system, one from the Brunswick ELO. Is that ELO? I received, obviously, from Sheila Bork, who is on the Budget Finance Committee in Raymond, just for your information. I received some from somebody with the Chamber of Commerce, from 3 teachers. And and obviously some of them I've sent on to you, but and I'd be happy to send them all on if you'd like. But I was very impressed with all the majority. Everyone spoke about the connections that she's making in the community and this position is making in the community. And I believe, and I've said this to someone, if we ask for this capstone project, that we need to support it. And okay, I'm done.
All right.
Pete.
Thank you. So, with that being said, I think this is a good time to remind everyone that our job as a board is to approve a figure.
Right.
A budgetary figure. And we can't make decisions on how the money is spent. So,
absolutely.
I mean, a lot of the correspondence comes to us, and it's a great forum to get people's opinions out. And what we can do as a board is to turn around and share those public sentiments with the A team. But ultimately, it's the A team that decides how they're going to allocate the budget figure that we come up with. And I know the A team spends a tremendous amount of time and they prioritize the needs and the wants, and a lot of the administrators make sacrifices on things that would benefit them.
Right.
So I just think that's important to let the public know, is that we as a board can't say, all right, we want that position put back in. We can say we want $70,000 put back in, but how the A team chooses to disperse that is ultimately their decision.
Absolutely correct, and thank you for saying that. When I've spoken about this to others, I've made that comment, but it's good to have that out in front of all the 12 people that are listening to us at 4 o'clock in the morning on the Raymond Broadcast Network. So anyway, it's 12 in Raymond, I just think. Okay. All right. So yes.
I don't agree with that statement. I don't totally agree with that statement. And I think it is the responsibility of this board to figure out, be part of the solution or the questions that come up as to, what is important and what isn't. We are the people that vote on the budget. And if that piece wasn't important, then we wouldn't have all these details in here as to what it is and what it isn't. And I'm not saying they're not the bigger part of it, because I think they definitely are, because they know what it takes to educate students. But I don't think it's appropriate to say that we really know nothing, because now we're sounding, that to me sounds like when we used to be in front of the town council, it was like, no, take 2,000 out of the budget, I don't care where you take it from. And I remember there was a lot of conversation back then. It's kind of like, well, shame on them, because they have no idea what's needed. So I think we need to know the need, and the need is positions or whatever it may be. So in reality, we're saying, yeah, you've convinced us. That is, and I'm picking on Lynette, but I'm going to use her. Yeah, that is a position. We agree. We agree with them that yes, that's something that's going to be beneficial to our students. You know what I mean? So I don't think we're like 100% like, well, we don't really care what's there. We care what the bottom figure is. So we do have some responsibility, I think, as to what stays and what goes.
I don't want to put words in Pete's mouth, but I don't think that's what he was saying. We care, and we are sharing that. We're sharing our caring, but in reality, it is the A team that makes the decision. So,
I would like to think that our opinion or maybe a recommendation would be taken under advisement,
right.
But at the end of the day, it's not our choice.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions or directions or?
Oh, can you go back to that social work thing? I got a little lost in that.
I'm sorry.
I wasn't sure whether you were saying, yeah, we should have one. I thought you were kind of like saying one way, and then I got a feeling you were going to kind of.
Well, I was saying one way. I believe that a social worker is very important. I believe that we talked about it last week with when Drew made his presentation, and he talked about the need for a social worker and an assistant principal, another assistant principal. I personally think the social worker is very, very important, and I've said the reasons why. That's been my focus. Been my concern for kids as long as I've been teaching, and so I can get emotional about it, but I won't. But that is very, you're welcome. But that is very important to me, but I don't think that in this budget we have that. We have the extra money.
That's what I thought you were saying, but I just wasn't sure.
No, that's what I'm saying. We don't have the extra money, I feel. So, if no one else has any.
I have a question.
Of course you do, Marge.
With what you have presented here, do you have numbers for us? As to.
Thank you. That was a great question.
I knew you liked that one.
The
That
tax
really
implications on the whole.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to say tax implications yet.
Okay.
But what I would tell you is that with the addition of the $140,000, which represents that upper part of the page, that brings our budget to a little over 5%, 5.1. The other variable, which I think the board is very, obviously we've talked about it so much, is that we still don't know finally where we are with health insurance, which could have a significant impact. And if I had my crystal ball, and I'm not going to be held to my crystal ball, but my guess is that you would be probably somewhere back at where we start initial budget, somewhere between 4.9 and 4.8. If we had that additional $880,000 that comes from health and savings on health insurance.
Have you also taken into consideration, because, and I know it really, I mean, I'm glad that everybody, all the letters and that it's like really nice, but I think what that position is doing for us students is tremendous.
Yes, we agree.
You know, so it's, so could we kind of look at that, with that in it? Would that be a drastic impact, Chris?
I'm going to tell you in just a second.
I know you are.
You know, while you do that, I just want to make a comment, if I may, Madam Chair.
Go right ahead, Madam Vice Chair.
That position, for me, is pretty broad in impact. First and foremost, because on policy, when we talked about changing graduation requirements from community service to the capstone, on paper, I remember distinctly on paper, yes, this is the way to go for all the different reasons, and I'm not going to get into all the pluses for our students to do a capstone versus the community service. And I remember distinctly at the time, in policy, we talked about how is this going to be implemented? How are we going to make this happen? And you know, as with anything that's new, you don't know what you don't know. And what I'm learning, and what we heard tonight from a teacher who's in the trenches for that, is this is a lot more time intensive for our, who are those people? Where are they? The advisors.
Advisors.
The advisors. The framework was for the advisors to manage this. And let's not fool ourselves that that's not the only thing that they're responsible for as advisors. And again, I'm being redundant. Being new, I think the learning and aha for me is, A, it's new, but B, there's a lot more legwork into the community required than we thought. And I go back again to our discussions in the policy committee, where it's like, oh, this is going to be fabulous, and it is fabulous. This is going to be fabulous. The students are going to go out, and they're going to get a mentor, and they're going to do this, and they're going to do that, and they're going to craft this amazing capstone project. Well, I don't think there's any mistake in saying that it's not that easy. And it's not that easy for students to try to make those connections that we're expecting them to make. And it's irresponsible of us to expect our staff to take that on. So then when I'm thinking about the whole thing, it feels like we are not providing enough support for a requirement that we put in place for our students. There simply is not enough support if this position were to go away for our students to be successful. And that's kind of on us a little bit. Now, you can either say, okay, this was a pilot thing and we just don't have the capacity to do it, or you could look at it as this is a fabulous opportunity for our students to investigate something that they want to do, that they're interested in, that they can make a connection to outside of school that will enhance their post-secondary education, whatever that may be. whether you go to college, whether you don't go to college, whatever you do. It is a really unique opportunity that we've set up for our students. But I am very, very concerned that we are not providing the support for them. And then I'm going to take a little dovetail as I'm like,
go ahead, you're on a roll.
The other piece to this that I'm learning is that, first of all, our school does not have a marketing department. There's no money for marketing for RSU 14. We keep talking about ad nauseum over the years, and it's extremely difficult how we can make a bridge to the community, how can we make connections to the community,
right,
how we can get the community involved in the schools, how we can gather more support from and invested in our schools. And we, again, don't have the capacity. These two birds over here don't have the time to go trolling around, talking to business leaders and touting the schools and trying to get mentors or trying to sell our system. And it's a fabulous system. And I think I know of one other district that has a similar position, and it's pretty fabulous. And this, for me, provides a bridge between the schools and our community.
Mm-hmm.
And we are really, really lacking a strong bridge between our schools and the community. And what I'm loving that I'm hearing is the connections that we're making and that people in the community are becoming invested in our students. And what I'm hearing is some of these students are being provided opportunities that will have long-reaching impact on their life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we want. I mean, that's what we want. Yes? I wish you would interrupt me.
While Christine's coming forward, and some of you are on the board when we made the change to Capstone, and others of you weren't, but in the original proposal that was made for Capstone, there was the discussion of the addition of a position to support it further down the road, which through budgets we did not have that opportunity. So I think that's going back 5 years now when that proposal was initially talked about. But one of the things as we got to implementation was adding additional supports.
So I just wanted to dovetail on Kate saying it so well. We've charged our teachers with bringing the real life into their classrooms, and in the meantime we still have to teach the basics and the skills to scaffold for all our students. And then I watch teachers who try to create these incredible opportunities out in our communities, and they're exhausted or they fall short, and so it gets wrapped up and it becomes more of a frazzled piece for our adults than for our children. And I haven't been able to work with Lynette yet, but I hear every day what she's doing. And I think we're at an opportunity where we want to bring the real world into the classroom. We want to have this community embrace our children. This is a person who that is their role. We're adding so many things onto our teachers. We've talked about initiatives. We've talked about raising our academics. And in the very short time this young lady has been here, the world has expounded in some of our areas. And when I hear that she wants to not only work at the high school but reach out to middle school, our teachers are grasping. They know this is what the best thing is for students, and they want to do that. There is just not physically enough times. I mean, you heard Jeff Neal talk about we have to budget time for our children, our own kids, our own families. So I think the Capstone project is a wonderful experience. My own daughter, as a freshman at a different school, has to do a capstone looming in 3 years and scared to death, doesn't know what it looked like. How do I do this, Mom? What am I supposed to do? And as a parent, I'm like, I don't know what to tell you right now. I know that capstone presentation was snowed out, and this young lady behind me actually created a presentation on her own so that parents could get that information still that evening. I mean, there are not many people who go out and above and older, because you know what, there are us anxious parents out there wanting to know what has to happen. And so I know that you can't add things to the budget or however this whole thing works, but I think if we go back to our original vision, success for all, and that we dreamt of a world where we provide opportunities for our students in our community, the bridge is broken. There isn't a bridge. And I think that if we can build that, we can be more successful, and that we can really show how RSU 14 shines. I know I have people in different communities asking me, what are you guys doing? How are you doing that? And we want to keep that out. We can't market. You're right. But it's out there. So I just, thank you. Just wanted to add that. Thanks. Yep.
Well, why did they get voted out then if it's not?
Because when you're looking at a new math initiative, let's say that 2 years I've been coming to you. We've looked at data. We prioritize everything. She's been here 6 months. I mean, it's one of those things where you're not even understanding what someone's doing, and now you do, and you see this impact. Look at special education. I work down the hall from this woman and daily see her getting the news of, I have to add 3 more kids. I don't know what I'm going to do. And I think that when you weigh those things out, you know, I don't know where you start. You look at Jumpstart we talked about tonight.
Right.
I think we have to make those decisions. I think in the past, I've been to you when we've added a math coach because we were, you know, given extra funds, and that's changed the way that we do instruction. I think this is another case where we have this opportunity. So.
I'm not disagreeing with that, but that came from.
Correct. You're right, Eric. You're absolutely right.
It came from that side.
The process we have to go through, we also have to shoot for this number, and we sit there and you.
I get it.
Right. Right.
I get it.
Wow. And did you have something you wanted to say?
No.
Oh.
Just Chris.
But that kind of stabbing kind of motion.
That angry fist.
Yeah.
You know.
Does anybody else have any comments, Sandy?
Just to try to move this ahead, I appreciate the fact that the A team ultimately gives a recommendation to the board, and I like that process. At the same time, I think the A team would be most comfortable for us to revisit this and make this a priority. It's all the reasons why it should happen, and a little history here. You know, it wasn't too long ago when we struggled coming in at 2.9%.
Right.
And this year, probably, even though it might not impact the tax rate significantly, we're probably at a higher percentage of the budget right now than probably we've seen in 4 or 5 years. So our dance, like your dance, is trying to find the magic in the dollar amount that we can present to the community with a straight face that's affordable and will continue to provide a great academic, social program for our kids. So I'm comfortable. I don't want to speak for Chris, but I think we should revisit this, talk to the A team real quick tomorrow, and see if we can put this back in.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Last question for the group. So is it more important than a social worker? Just throw it out there. I don't need it.
I don't think it's necessarily more important, but I think it might be the first thing that we want to tackle.
And I agree.
That's my opinion.
They're pretty much the same dollar figures, but I guess according to what everybody's saying, it's not our choice anyway. So. Well, I did hear that. Didn't I hear that? Did you have that answer, by the way?
I do have that answer.
Thank you.
Which is if, and again, this is some hypothetical pieces. If we see an additional 3% savings in health insurance, and the Director of Community Connections would be added back in, we would be at 4.92. We started this budget process at 4.99. Version 7 was at 4.85, but this would put us at 4.92.
And can you tell me what it would be if we added a social worker as well?
Give me 1 second, and I will gladly put that in my spreadsheet.
I mean, we got one social worker for 2 schools.
Can you clarify, is that Wyndham Middle School and
Wyndham Middle School
and
Manchester.
Manchester.
That's a lot of kids for one social worker. And with as many kids that may need social help,
keep in mind that special ed brings back one out of service. We've got that.
What is Jordan Middle?
Jordan
one.
Small.
I'm sorry. Jordan Small have one or a 3/4, or I don't remember.
I'm not sure. I don't know that they have a social worker. I think they have a guidance counselor.
Okay.
And we can look in the book.
So that's
Yes. Yes.
Sorry.
They have guidance.
They have guidance.
Hello.
Hello.
So social workers typically fall under my budget line. What Janny's asking for is a social worker to service non-identified students. So to answer your question, we do have Brooke Harris is in Raymond. So she works 2.5 days a week, and she serves primarily students with her primary focus is students with IEPs and students with 504 plans. We've had a couple kids in a pretty critical situation who are not identified, and so under our child find obligation, she did meet with those students and families to get that process sort of started. And that's my understanding is she's the only social worker in that building. Currently, between Wyndham Middle and Manchester Sue Austin is a social worker under the special education umbrella. So again, our focus is to meet students' IEPs first. And, at this point she's spread pretty thin, but I didn't come asking for social work services, which could use, but in the scheme of things, I need other staff.
And I know for Raymond Elementary, there's also the Spurwink. Is it Spurwink?
Yeah, so that's confusing to the public. So we, in our district, have the capacity that we have, and Chris will probably know more than I do, but we have arrangements with contracted companies to come in and provide social work services. So all we do is physically give them an office space. They are not employees of RSU 14. We don't schedule the appointments. We don't do any of that sort of stuff, and they're not tied to students with or without IEPs. It's a private pay through the parents' insurance company, but we know that getting kids to appointments is really difficult, especially for families who work. And so being able to have the opportunity to offer that in school. So Wyndham Primary does that. Raymond Elementary does that. I believe Manchester has one. They have one at the high school. But again, it's not somebody who's on our staff.
And it's somebody who's only there 1 or 2 days a week. Who's
correct, mostly one. Yeah, it's a few times a month.
Right. And I was talking this afternoon. The EPS formula for students receiving for social work is 300 per one social worker. Well, that EPS formula was done in 2013. So since then, we have had an exponential rise in all of the things that we've talked about already. So in Manchester and Wyndham Middle School, the total population is, I don't know off the top of my head, 1,050, and we have one social worker. One. So, I mean, I know I'm preaching to the choir here.
Right.
If my druthers would be to have a social worker and to have Lynette. I also think, getting back to to Lynette's position, when we talk about selling the budget, if we have connections in the community, especially the age-friendly community, those people come out and vote. And if we have a connection that Lynette has made with that population, those are the people that will vote for budgets. Right. And so that's an important.
No, and I know that you've talked about the process, Jenny, but I always look at things as a staggered process. So if we were to answer your question, we could use social work services in every building,
sure,
but you have to start somewhere.
Right.
And so at the high school, we have over 1,000 kids, and we have a part-time social worker that's regular. So I have Doug Daigle and Kai McDonald, who are social workers. Right. Doug is half mine and Kai's all mine, and that's for special ed. But they, Doug sees kids. So you have a half-time social worker and then a person who comes in from the outside agency, and that's it for social work services at the high school. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So just so everyone's with the addition, if you put those 2 additional positions in, you're at 5.09%.
Well, last year we had to try and work to trim it down to 9 point. What?
No, that was the tax.
That was the
impact.
tax.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm
right.
confusing the two.
Chris? Yeah, I saw, I wrote down 5.1% with just the top version.
So that would also include, that's assuming that insurance goes down to 4% with an additional 180,000.
Okay. But then we're at 4.92 if we add the Director of Community Connections.
Correct. And you're at 5.09 if you were to add a social worker in as well.
Okay.
What was the increase last year?
You were close to, for overall tax increase or overall increase period?
Overall increase period.
I'd have to take a look at the budget history on that to see where we are. I know it was close to 9% in Wyndham on taxes, but over the overall budget, I would need to go into budget history to pull that, which I can have prepared for the board for the next.
Okay. Pete, do you have you look like you're ready to
Oh, no, I thought we should have that. What the percentage increase was that we ended up at last year?
Yeah.
So overall last year for 18-19, overall budget increase was a $1,115,000, and it was a 2.48% increase overall in the budget. So it's almost double.
Yeah.
But the other piece difference is that there's a difference in tax rate because a couple of things. One is some significant additional subsidy for special education services. In fact, I'm remembering close to $600,000 for that, but over $1.1 million in additional subsidy, recognizing some of the increased costs that the RSU has. Which last year, remember, it was a loss of close to $600,000 in subsidy. So not only expenses going up, but our subsidy went backwards, and I think that's why we saw such an impact on the tax rate.
So, just make sure the wheels are turning forward here. This budget is a higher increase than last year, but the potential tax implications, which we may not talk about tonight, would be less.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And when you add, but adding $1.1 million in subsidy,
right,
offsets those taxes. Tax offset is going to be more towards the Wyndham side, and because subsidy is it's targeted through the formula and what the basic expectation for each community is based upon. This is all EPS 101, but Wyndham has met its fiscal capacity, and so as subsidy comes, that subsidy gets applied directly to Wyndham through the formula. Raymond has not yet met its fiscal capacity based upon the state mill rate that's been set, and so when you have additional subsidy, Raymond taxes are going to go up greater than what Wyndham is. And so before we make all this public and all that, which we prepared to do for next week based upon some direction from the board tonight, yes, you are going to see some difference in taxes between the two communities, but then also with that additional subsidy, you're not going to see the tax impact, at least on the Wyndham side, that you saw last year. Because I think last year we were close to 9%, is that right?
9%, yes.
From the school board portion.
Right.
So I guess what would be helpful from the board, I'm hearing some interest in, first of all, special education, but also hearing some interest in the Director of Community Connections, and then also interest in social worker, what that looks like. Are you looking for additional information on social work services as far as the number of social workers per students across the RSU? Just a little help or direction with that.
Yeah, I'd like to have that.
Okay. Just so that we can get our homework done for you folks.
Next week.
Next week, because we would like to vote April 10th on the final budget.
Right.
Was it
Done.
Drew that presented the need for another
Yes.
social worker? Okay,
Yeah.
just wanted to.
He
refresh
presented that
Like a wish list.
that was a wish list.
Okay.
And we asked, I think it was Eric perhaps who asked, I don't remember. Would you rather have a social worker or an assistant principal next year? And he said it would be difficult to know which one.
Okay.
So, well, are we all set for tonight? No? What?
I don't know. I think this is a good chance to talk about things, right? Like initial impressions and
Sure.
things that we're thinking about, right? Because
Yeah,
we never
sure.
seem to
Yes.
have enough time when it comes around. Not that I want to drag the meeting on, but I mean, this is our chance.
Time.
So
Let's do it.
if we get a feel for where everybody is or concerns that we have, I mean, because for one thing, we always talk about percentages, but the thing is as the budget amount goes up, a percentage is not equal to what a percentage was the year before.
Right.
So, when you're looking in whole dollars, so last year we had a $1.1 million increase in whole dollars or whatever, and this year we're looking at, like with the proposals that we're talking about, 2.4, 2.5, if I'm doing the math right. So, look at it both ways, not just on a percentage, but also on what the actual whole dollar impact is. Just something that, I want to bring up. But yeah, how are people looking at this? Are they comfortable with the percentage, with the dollar amount? We got to know whether we've got some work to do or whether we're almost there.
Right. I think from the public's perspective, they don't know percents. They really don't. I think with them, it's kind of like, what's going to cost me? So I think the dollar implication of what is this going to do to my taxes is going to be the thing that either makes or breaks, I think, this budget. We're interested in the percent, but as Pete said, if you look at what we have now, and the implication money-wise is going to be a lot less than it was when it was half. The percent was half that, and I think that's kind of, to me, is a selling point, because I'm all for keeping taxes down. Well, we all want to keep taxes down, but in a case like this, it looks like going for the dollar value versus the percent, and we've always focused on, got to keep it below 3%. Oh no, go 2.99, blah blah blah. And I think I'm thrilled that and I don't mind. It's terrible. It's going to sound terrible to everybody out there, but I don't mind spending this money because I think the tax implication is going to help. It's going to offset the fact that now's the time to do it. We've had all those years. Multiple years, right, Kate, where it's kind of like, we can't do this because it adds too much and it's kind of like we're always cutting something. So I'm happy with this. I think this is good. And if we look at that dollar value, I think it has a really positive impact. That's my thought.
I think one reason why I would have a hard time looking solely at the dollar value personally would be simply because of the negotiated contracts, how much money it's going to cost just to open the doors with just payroll, without adding any instruction whatsoever. We'd be looking at what, a 4.3% increase without adding anything. So for me, I think I would probably agree with Marge in the respect that I'm really interested as to the tax implications for the homeowner, and I believe that from what I've seen so far, that's actually going down. So I personally am. I think I'm leaning more towards in favor of adding these two positions, and I guess we're required to give we need to give the money to Lisa. She kind of needs those funds. So
yeah,
poor little man.
Okay.
I'm not high school for kids.
Yeah, we know. We know. Pete.
So does anybody feel like we have the capacity for more? Because, and I'll just say it, and it seems taboo to talk about, but I have a concern, and I don't have the answers, but I think it's going to be part of a broader discussion that we're going to need to have going forward, and that is that because of the amount of money that we have to spend on special education, I'm looking at it advocating for the other students that are having to forego stuff because of this. We've had all the 18 members come and tell us the things that they'd like to have or the things that they feel they need. And then we've heard Christine and everybody talk about how hard it is to go through those cuts and decide where to prioritize. And I don't know how this possibly can be sustainable moving forward. So, and I don't have the answers, and I don't know if this is going to have to reach state or federal levels, but I don't know how districts can be expected to carry this. The other thing that I don't understand is that we've got overall our population we keep being told that our student population is remaining relatively unchanged. But yet, then we hear about all these kids coming into the district, and they're all requiring special services. Proportionately, traditionally, we've had 1 in 6 students in the district that require special services. I have a feeling that's moving more towards 1 out of 5 or whatever. But even so, 1 out of 5, that's 20% of the student population. Lisa's increase, version 6, originally 793,000. We have an additional 440,000 now. We're looking at 1.2 million. Mike's budget, he said a chunk of that is going up related to special services. Bill Hansen coming to us with $1 million of CRP projects. About 50% of that directly related to modifications for special education. Over 50% of the $2.5 million in budget increase this year is going to that 20% roughly of the population. And what's that doing to the other 80% of our students and teachers? So again, I think it's a discussion that we need to have.
It's above us. It's federal law. She's got to tell people. Tell it gets bad. You said we don't want to change. Well, it's not sustainable. So it's bad enough that people vote people in that will make the changes to address it. Until then, we've got to live. When I first was a school board member, I used to come to knock on saying, "Why are we doing this? Well, look at this law. Why are we doing it? What about this law?" We realize, okay.
No, and that's why. That's why I asked the question too: is do we have the capacity to do more? Because it's not fair to the other students that.
Do you have anything in mind?
No, I don't.
I think,
I hear your point loud and clear.
Yeah, and I like it, and I think I like what you're saying, and I think that we can't fix everything this year, but I think us as a board saying, hey, we want the 18 to take a look at adding these 2 things back in. Tell us if that would work for you. Tell us if this is what you want. And then next year, instead of saying, cut everything and get us down to bare minimum, saying, no, come and tell us, what is it you want? I think that it's not necessarily about waving a magic wand and fixing it now, but in making sure everybody knows that this is the direction we want to go, that we're not a district that sits around and says we want to just maintain the status quo and just follow the laws and do the bare minimum. We have to create that culture, and we have to put it out there. So this, to me, is a first step, saying, we don't want you to come in cutting everything. We want you to tell us. Tell us one thing that you would like to have.
Hey, Kate, you just asked me if I had one thing, and I didn't at the moment, but I'm thinking now about Drew. Like, I don't know how Drew functions with the limited amount of support that he has. So, I mean, that's something. So, do we have the capacity or the willingness to go back to the A team and say, hey, if there was something else that you wanted, or what's at the top of the list of things that you cut?
They don't drop dead. They don't fall over.
Who are you guys anyway? What happened to the real board?
Well, is that, honestly, Pete, I'm a little shocked.
Yeah.
But I appreciate that point of view because it's not a common discussion that we have about what else do we need to do for our students. When I look at this list, and the reason why I can support the social worker and the director of community connections is those have broad-reaching student impact, and it's not just special ed. I mean, that is pretty broad. That could have really some positive impact. This 439 is like a wild card for us. I mean, this is the first we've gotten this figure. If we didn't have this figure, wouldn't these two be easy peasy at the bottom of the page?
Yeah.
No brainer. Drop in a bucket.
But again, I know I'm being redundant. I don't want us to be in a position where we're in crisis. And we just cannot be in crisis with students. We just can't. And I like the forward thinking of this. I'd be willing, in addition to the two variables at the bottom, I mean, if we're really looking for direction, which I think you are for the A team, come back to us with one more thing that you would like, that you think would have the largest impact on the district in one way or the other, whether it's Drew's assistant, hoo-hoo, or whatever that might be.
And we're not saying that we'll do it. But.
No. But I would like to hear what they think the next priority is.
Right.
What's the next priority?
Can I add something to that, though?
Would you?
Please. Can we get the tax implication on that when you come back with those? Is that possible?
And I would like a pony.
So here's what I can do for you.
This is us negotiating.
Yeah.
What I can give you is I can give you the tax impact with social worker. I can give you the tax impact with just the director of community connections. I can give you the tax impact with both of those positions. And I will give you the social work. I'm just going back to listening to the discussion, and we had the opportunity in a board workshop, I think it was February 6th, where the administrators went through and talked about, here's some of the things I would have liked for that budget. I would suggest that the A team, if that's something that you'd like us to revisit, that we go back to that February 6th document. I will tell you that many of the items that are listed here tonight were top priority items based upon student need that were identified by the administrative team. There were no ponies on that list. There were no ponies on that list, but that's something that we can go back to give you an idea. I think it's also healthy at any time to let the public know, what it is that our administrators and our program directors are looking for. I will also let you know that you're very fortunate to have a group of administrators and program directors that are fiscally responsible and try to do the best they can with what they actually have that's been allocated to them. And I think Bill Hansen is one of those miracle workers who does quite a bit in this district with that.
I agree. Yes, Marge?
Okay. All right. Now, I hate to be the negative Nanny, but here we go. Because it's just because the budget looks good, it shouldn't be, well, let's go spend some more money. Let's go spend some more tax dollars or whatever. Because now we're sounding like we are not fiscally responsible. I don't remember anything other than probably Bill's stuff, because he usually, God bless him, takes the hit because he quietly says, well, I can kind of like put this on the back burner and I can put this on the back burner. But as far as all of the building administrators, when they came, so the only one I would even think should be consideration would be in the facility budget, because you know what, if our buildings and all our stuff is not up to where it needs to be, then we don't have a safe place. We don't have, now to say, God, I hate to use that word, but Bill will kill me. We don't have something that we would prefer to have our students and our staff in, you know. But this is, I don't know. It just doesn't ring right. It's kind of like, well, okay, well, this is good. This is a good budget, so let's spend more money. I'm sorry, but that's what I'm hearing, because I didn't hear anybody come up in dire need other than Bill, only because we sit in other meetings with him, that is really, you know, taking a hit. There were some things that would be nice to have, but that's just my take on it.
Well, can I say something?
Mm-hmm.
What I see is that we're looking at programs that will also help the rest of the students. I think the programs, the education.
What programs?
Not just the buildings.
Are we going to get a new program?
I don't know, but
see what I'm saying?
There were things that they didn't bring to the table because of cutting.
But they've only got 1 week or 2 weeks.
So no, but I think that's what you were saying. It's about.
I can understand that, but I can't see it for this budget, I guess is what I'm saying. Yeah. It's kind of like, this is like, oh, quick, what can we?
So I think what we're asking is, if we asked everybody to be a little bit more proactive instead of reactive. So not waiting till there's a crisis. Mm-hmm. What can we do to prepare and be proactive in that? And I don't think any of us are saying, go get everybody ponies, right, or, you know, that we're going to, except for me. Anyway, but I think Pete even specifically said, we're not saying we're going to be able to do it for you, but if we said, okay, so we've got this thing that we want to put back in, this thing that we want to put back in, what would you say is the next thing collectively as the A team? The next thing that would be the priority on the list, so that we know what that looks like.
And they've done that in the past. When we've given them that.
We're not saying we're doing it.
No, what
I understand that, but it's kind of like, you're causing extra work for them.
So if I could, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So the reason why I am actually in favor of having them go back to it is because the buying power right now is better than it has been in years.
I mean, the spending power, because we're low on the thing.
Marge.
The reason why I'm saying that is because the tax implications were so high last year, and you know that.
I do.
This year, they're considerably lower. Now, I'm not saying that we should match what we did last year, by no means. But what I'm saying is, we as a board right now actually have the ability to get a little bit more for a little bit less.
Can I answer that?
Sorry. Eric's next.
So really, we're talking money, but we're not talking money. We're talking what the needs of the students are. So yeah, you can say it's a dollar amount, but each one of those represents some type of support for the students. So yes, it's money, but really it's the end result for the student, and that's what we're here for. So we've trained the 18 for my time, but we've trained the 18 to come, here's my budget. Mm-hmm. And you gotta go, and I had to ask for an increase. And we shouldn't do that. No, we shouldn't be spendthrifts. No, I don't think we're being spendthrifts, but we should be looking at it for the best possible education experience we can get without being frivolous. The support's got to be there. And I think when you said you're surprised at Pete, well, I think people like myself, I want to come on board. But the more I've been involved with it and seeing what teachers have to go through without the support, the more things we ask them, and the more that they do, the burnout you're going to get, the less productive they're going to be, the more turnover you're going to get. All of that stuff's going to happen. Maybe less education time. So it is dollars, but it's dollars for the community's kids.
One of the things that I was so struck with last meeting was when Pete said, "I'm so glad to see you coming forward with more money for supplies," because usually that's the first thing that gets cut. And as a teacher, when the supplies are cut, where do you think the supplies come from? They come from the teachers. And that affects all of the kids. It affects special ed kids, it affects regular ed kids, but I don't know the answer either, Pete, about how we should be looking at this, but I am an advocate for that, for us to look at that process, to what can we bring in addition to the things that we are mandated to do for special ed. What do we bring to the regular ed too? So I'm in agreement with you. So
I could just speak for a second. I just did a quick scan of, I have all the version changes in front of me, and what you see represented in the list here was, if you want to think about it, was the last out in the cuts. So what you have you're talking about restoring in this list is what kind of, as the administrative team went through the process, that was the one they were holding to the most tightly as we got down to some final numbers. So, I think it would be good for us to bring this back to the 18. We can definitely discuss, if there's any other unmet needs and communicate that to the board. I think, though, as we get into next week, we have a week left. Next week's our last chance to deliberate. I also want to remind the board, which is that we're supposed to know healthcare numbers on April 4th. And so that could also be that we're going to have to do some communication outside of a meeting as that number comes in, because that will help us finally settle in on what that number is, because much of the discussion tonight is centering on the idea that there might also be some savings with that. If that savings is not realized, that may impact the board's decision, and we need to prepare a final budget for that 10th vote. So.
Okay, thank you. Are we all set and need any more time? Okay. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? We're adjourned.